Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest in our series of Farm Africa live webinars. This is the second in the series. A couple of weeks ago, we had an excellent discussion, panel event on Farm Africa's work in northern Uganda and Ethiopia with goats and women's empowerment, tying in with our fabulous Goat Power exhibition. And this time, we're moving our discussion on to talk about COVID-19 and the enormous locust swarms that are currently around in East Africa, and which are causing such destruction. So we're calling this week's webinar From COVID-19 and Locusts to Greener Pastures. We've got about 100 people dialing in for the webinar today, so thank you all for being online. I'm Dan Collison. I'm the Chief Executive at Farm Africa. And as I think probably all of you know, Farm Africa is an international NGO. We work to strengthen livelihoods for smallholder farmers in East Africa. And we do this through three main approaches. We work on agricultural production, improving production in commodities, in food security, improving inputs for farmers for production. We also work on improving access to markets. So there's a large part of our work focused on value chains and the linkages between farmers and agro dealers. And finally, there's a very strong strand of our work around natural resource management and environmental conservation, environmental protection. This is a Zoom webinar, as you know, so I think most people are pretty familiar with Zoom these days. If by any chance we have an interruption in service, then we'll work hard to get it going again. If your link drops off, then re-click on the button on the link and you'll come back into the meeting. We are recording today's panel discussion, and also part of the whole point of it is we're taking questions. So please do use the Q&A function on Zoom. Any questions that come in over the course of the meeting, they'll be moderated and I'll get the chance to put them to our panelists. Don't forget to put your name, ideally your full name, if you're going to put a question in. If you're into tweeting, then do let your Twitter followers know that you are on this great webinar today. And let's get into it. I'm first of all going to introduce our two wonderful panelists, my colleagues in Kenya, Mary Nyale and Anna Mbatia. So Mary and Anna, let me hand over to you to say hello and to introduce yourselves. Mary, over to you first.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Nyale. I work with Farm Africa as a programs manager in charge of operations and implementation of the Kenyan project, and I'm broadcasting from Nairobi.
Great to have you with us, Mary. And Anna.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Mbatia. I'm the technical manager for agriculture at Farm Africa. I support projects across all countries of Farm Africa operation. Thank you.
Super. All right, before we get into the panel though, just a little bit of a scene setter, a bit of context from me. East Africa clearly is in the grip of a very, very serious triple threat. And what we mean by triple threat is the combination of the COVID pandemic, locust swarms and flooding. Although at the moment the public health crisis around COVID is somewhat less in East Africa than it is in other parts of the world, certainly there's a very, very severe and prolonged impact on food systems, on food security, and overall economic contraction, and increases in prices, increasing inflation. That's serious for urban consumers. It's serious for rural smallholder farmers as well. alongside that, the other topic for today is these historically huge locust swarms that are spreading across the entire region since the end of last year, really. The worst swarms in 70 years. Very devastating, destructive on crop production, on animal fodder, as we know, reducing fields to ruin in the course of a day or an afternoon. And thirdly, on top of those two things, across the region, the worst floods in 40 years, floods affecting over 6 million people, and perhaps even more seriously, there's an apparent and very rapid increase in the frequency and the severity of flooding events across the region. And it doesn't take too much of a stretch to realize that that's a pretty strong indicator of climate change. All those three things combine to really increase vulnerability on already very fragile livelihoods and very precariously positioned communities, the very communities that Farm Africa works with. The UN estimates that there will be around 73 million people at risk across East Africa by the end of the year of serious food insecurity. And that's a substantial increase in the course of this year, about a doubling of the number of people at risk. So this is a serious crisis that the region's facing. We're going to talk about two of those components. We'll start with the locust invasion and move on to COVID. So Anna, starting with you. East Africa is currently affected by a serious invasion of desert locusts. For the benefit of our viewers, our participants in the webinar, just tell us a bit more about locusts themselves, what kind of creatures they are and the kind of damage that they do.
Thank you, Dan. Locusts, or what we are calling desert locust, is one of the many species of the grasshopper family. These locusts are fairly harmless when they're in solitary state. That is where it's just existing on its own as a solitary insect. But because of population, when they continue breeding and the conditions are good and the population increases, is that they get together into swarms and now start migrating into other areas for newer breeding areas, and that's when they start harming the environment or the ecosystem. So the desert locust, like any other insect or most insect, has got 3 stages in which it lays an egg, and once it lays an egg, depending on the temperatures and the environmental conditions, within 10 to 65 days, is that egg will develop into the next stage, which is the nymph. This is basically a solitary stage, a non-moving stage of the locust. And after this stage, it will molt after maybe 20 to 40 days or even more days, depending on the conditions, to an adult. An adult can be able to live for maybe 2.5 months to 5 months. And within that lifespan of the desert locust, being an adult, the female is able to lay eggs at least 3 times in its lifetime. The challenge with the eggs is that the female is not laying 1 egg. Like the gregarious locust, it would be laying at least 80 eggs per any lay that it is doing. And being that they're numerous in number in their swarms, then there's a likelihood that the number increases and then starts becoming a challenge to farming livelihoods.
And we can see from that the speed at which the swarms multiply, and the video clip that we saw gives us a sense of the intensity of those swarms. Where are these locust swarms coming from? And tell us about the kind of damage that they are having across the region.
To bring the locust invasion into a little bit closer focus or into a closer context, is that in 2018, 2019, there were some cyclones that were experienced in the Indian Ocean. And what these cyclones did is that areas that are normally dry in the Arab Peninsula started experiencing really good rainfall. And some of these areas, say in the Saudi Arabia, some remote areas in Saudi Arabia and Yemen, had some locusts that had not been noted. And these locust numbers started building up. At the same time, in East Africa and Horn of Africa, the rains were also very good. The rainfall has been very good in these areas. So what happened when the numbers increased, the population grew in these areas, the locusts now got together in numbers, migrated across the Red Sea and came into now through Eritrea, through Somalia, into Ethiopia, and then also now into parts of East Africa like Kenya and Uganda. The challenge with these countries is some of these countries had not seen locusts like in Kenya in 70 years, in Ethiopia in 25 years. So basically, this was a new invasion that was unprecedented, that had not been predicted. All the local communities and governments had not had experience in being able to control.
Tell us about what the actual impact is on the ground with the farmers, and in particular, farmers that Farm Africa have been working with.
Desert locust, just as the name alludes, desert, is that they favor desert conditions. And in desert conditions, the kind of communities that are found are mostly pastoral communities. And so they would be more inclined to go and breed in desert conditions because they would prefer to lay their eggs in damp soils which are a bit sandy so they can be able to emerge quite well. So what's happening is that in Ethiopia, especially in Farm Africa, we've had our projects, especially the ones which are in pastoral conditions in drier areas. That's in areas like Tigray, Afar region, Amhara region, and also in Somali region where there are a lot of refugees communities that are living there being affected. In Kenya, the regions that were affected are more to the northeastern part of the country, which is the semi-arid region, and that's where the pasture communities are living. In Uganda, again, it's towards where the communities are living in an area called Karamoja, and the projects, all our projects which are situated in those areas were affected, and most of the direct effect was into the pastoral communities who now basically, when the locusts come in, start competing for the green. The locust is not selective, will eat any greenery that it finds. And basically now the locust, the pastures for the animals start becoming threatened.
And we can see what a devastating impact the swarms have on pasture, on croplands. What we'd like to move on to think about now is what can be done about it. We actually got a question from one of our participants, Celia Peter, who's asked the same question: what measures can communities and governments take to manage this current problem? I think we're going to start this answer, Anna, with a video showing some very interesting kind of local reaction to the invasion. It's quite a dramatic clip. It gives you a real sense of the reaction on the ground from the community. Tell us what's going on there.
This video, I took it when I was in Halaba. This is a town in the NSSPR of Ethiopia. And that was in January this year, 2020, just as the invasion was happening in that town. So as you can hear from the noises that the villagers collaboratively are making noise. They're looking for ways to be able to deter the locusts from infesting that particular village. So at Farm Africa, what we are doing is that we've empowered the local communities with information so they can be able to know what cultural or measures that they can be able to take at the local level to stop the locusts from invading their villages. you've seen in that photo just really tiny insects in the sky, but a swarm of a locust is quite big. It could be measuring between 40 to 80 million insects. And to understand the damage that this can do to a village is that the locust is able to consume twice maybe its body weight, or maybe once its body weight, about 2 grams every day. And when you measure that to the human consumption, is that a swarm can be able to consume food that is equal to about 35,000 people consuming in a day. So basically, when they come into an area, into a night, they just leave skeletons of trees.
Yeah.
Because they consume every greenery that is on site.
And Anna, apart from the local means of trying to move locusts away from the village and from the crops, what about government measures?
It's a collaborative effort in being able to control the locusts at regional level. Again, locusts are migratory. They will not respect a boundary and say they're just within Ethiopia or Kenya. They will move across borders. So at across borders, Farm Africa, we are members of a collaborative effort of an alliance called the Regional Desert Locust Alliance. And our aim in being within this alliance is that it's for information purposes. We inform other agencies who are in this field what we are doing at our level, and they also inform us what they are doing. Again, other than that is that we are able now to garner, efforts in being able, one, advocating for help to be able to come into certain areas. Surveillance of where the project areas are, we can be able now to give information of where the locusts have been sighted to be able to allow for control efforts. At the national level, we are members and we are helping the governments in being able to do the controls on the ground and also aerial sprays. And in the way that we help is that we can be able to facilitate fueling of the vehicles, which are going to these remote areas where the locusts could be breeding, and also giving our project vehicles to be able to go there.
So
and most important,
it's partly about sharing information with the authorities about where there are swarms, and something we don't have time to talk about now. But you mentioned, of course, spraying, which is what the governments do to control swarms, which can be effective, but as you were telling us earlier, also affects other bits of the food chain and can kill other sorts of small insects. So it has a high cost as well. Anna, thank you very much indeed. That's been a really good start. We'll come back to some locust questions later, but let's move across and bring Mary into the discussion. Mary, we're going to talk about something that everybody on this call is familiar with, perhaps more so than many of us are with actually living with locusts, which is living with COVID-19. Tell us about the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on smallholder farmers in the areas where Farm Africa is working.
Well, thank you, Dan. Farm Africa works with smallholder farmers, and our main mandate is to provide them with trainings, to just capacity build them on their technical skills, business, and also link them to input suppliers and marketers, so that then they are able to make a livelihood out of the agricultural or horticultural projects. Now, the COVID pandemic has stalled most of these activities that we have been doing. And recently we did a survey in Western Kenya, in Trans Nzoia County, where we talked with farmers on the effect of COVID on their businesses. And what came out clearly is that COVID has really affected their household income. And from the farmers that we interviewed, 67% of them experienced a reduced in income, and also there was some of them who also experienced an increase in terms of expenditure within their homes. And this is mostly affected by, of course, when you have reduced income and you have children at home, increased bills, so that causes a strain within the household. The other aspect that was also constrained is access to inputs, which the farmers usually get to be able to do their crop production. 60% of these farmers found it very hard to access inputs, and this was as a result of these inputs being available within reach because of the restricted movements from one region to another for the inputs to be available. And also the prices for these inputs went high, and 84% of these farmers attested to that. So they could not be able to buy the required inputs. The other thing is that on the provision of trainings to capacity build the farmers to be able to practice good agricultural practices. This is part of extension service that we provide, and also other organizations, including the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, because of the restricted movements and the restrictions that have been put on social distancing, it was difficult to provide these services and to reach the farmers. This is because Farm Africa works with the farmers when they are in groups, and we could not congregate and do the trainings. Yeah. So they were not able to get the services, they were not able to get timely trainings to be able to deal with situations on the ground. So you'll find that this, due to that broken information, then they are not able to achieve the maximum that they would get.
So Mary, you've described there very clearly, and with reference to those graphs as well, the impact on family income, the increase in expenditure, and the fact that the restrictions on movement in particular have really interrupted ways of working that are important to our projects, like training and extension, knowledge transfer. What kind of changes have you had to put in place in the project to account for these challenges?
Yes, of course, growing of food cannot stop, and people have to continue eating. So we had to ensure that farmers get the right information at the right time. And we introduced various digital platforms, but the easiest and simplest ones that we have been using is just this SMS and the WhatsApp platform, because that is accessible to all the farmers, to provide basic knowledge, basic tips on production. And these were mainly across the activities on the value chain, but mainly on post-harvest handling and selling. And then the other means that we were using, because Farm Africa, we do not work alone. We have a collaborative partnership with many other stakeholders. So we work with input suppliers who are able to coordinate with the input suppliers and the farmers to be able to support the farmers in terms of availability of the inputs. Yeah. So these farmers would work together in terms of putting their resources together and what they would require for their crop production, then order these products in bulk, so that then they avoid the movements from one place to another, to avoid getting those infections, and also to avoid exposing, maybe even gathering in one place to be able to access these inputs. We also worked with the commercial buyers to be able to assist the farmers in terms of backstopping and providing even the extension services to ensure that the farmers are able to produce the crops as per the required specifications. The other thing is that we used what we call champion farmers or lead farmers. These are farmers that are an example, a good example, or like teachers who have volunteered to be able to work with their own people on the ground. So these are trained farmers who are able to stand in on certain technical aspects at the village level. So these ones were able to move home to home and also support the farmers and provide them with some technical expertise, of course, with ourselves at the backdrop with the digital information being passed on.
Mary, you also mentioned earlier that you have started to stagger the access or the timing that people bring their produce to offtake points and markets. So again, to reduce the amount of contact and to increase social distancing. And in fact,
Sure.
I think we have a slide of some of the training with some chili farmers in Uganda, which is
Sure.
showing us, oh, there's the grading shed in Trans Nzoia. But yeah, this I suppose is kind of a familiar scene to many of us now, the fact that meetings, training events happen in a slightly different format now. And Mary, apart from those adjustments to the program, how are we keeping our staff safe, staff and partners during this challenging time?
Great. What we did when the pandemic came in is to liaise with the Ministry of Agriculture, who developed a protocol on how to handle agricultural activities on the ground in relation to COVID. So we adopted that and also worked alongside the Ministry of Health, so that then combining the two guidelines, then we were able to train our staff on how to handle the farmers, how to handle those linkages. And also now through the Ministry of Health, we're able now to take on board the hygiene guidelines, and also how we need to equip ourselves when we are going out to the field. Now, when the lockdowns and the restrictions were eased a bit, we were able now to start going out to our farmers, and we also trained our farmers on what to have on the ground when they're having a training. So as you saw, the social distancing and also putting on the masks, and also we could not meet with everyone. So we have a specific scheduled time for specific number of farmers within groups. Now, to note, which is very important, is on the collection or the selling of their produce, especially the export produce, is that, as you saw the grading, if you can go back to the grading shed, is that each collection center is manned by one quality controller who is able to assist the farmers to sort and grade and weigh their produce before it is collected by the buyer. Now, in these collection centers, this can be accessed by up to 500 farmers within 1 week as they go to deliver their produce. So what we did is that we worked with the commercial buyer to delay their picking time or their collection time to later in the evening, so that to give farmers time to be able to deliver their produce in batches. Like,
so this is about spreading out time that people take their produce to these centres. Mary, I'm going to move us on because I want to get onto some questions. One final very brief comment from you though on, we know that infection rates are increasing. Thankfully at the moment in East Africa they're somewhat lower than other parts of the world. But what is the trend where you are?
Yes, right now we are experiencing an increase of infections. It's like the second wave that has hit this region, and yes, it is devastating. It has destabilized economic sources for many people. We opened up our schools recently, and we are seeing children also being infected with this, and it's also quite a heavy load right now with the Ministry of Health, and our curfew hours have also been increased. So that means we will be working within limited times. But the good thing is that we still have a maximum of 100 people in terms of gathering. So in terms of our projects, we are able to still continue with the work. But very important to watch on the guidelines and the restrictions that are provided when meeting. So we are glad that can continue.
Mary, thank you very much indeed. So interesting to hear not only about the kind of trends in the pandemic, but also impact on the farmers and communities that we work with, and the adjustments that are being made to respond to that. Let's get into a few questions from the group. So I've got one here from Martin Johnson. And Martin's asking an interesting question. I think this is probably for you, Anna. If it's true that locusts prefer to breed in dry areas, does this mean that are there other safer areas where crops can be grown, where activity can be relocated to avoid those areas which are favored by locusts?
Wow, that's an interesting question, and thanks for it. I would like to give a disclaimer that because locusts prefer laying eggs in sandy soils, that makes that the other types of ecologies where crops can be grown safe.
Yeah.
If the locusts are hungry or they are migrating, looking for where it can be safe for them to breed, then they're going to pass through these other ecologies in their pathways.
Yeah.
And as they're resting, taking over, is that they're feeding on crops in those areas. Yeah. I'll give an example, say like in the SNNPR, these are the video that you've seen in Halaba. It's ideally not a place that locusts would be hatching their eggs in, but they did land in some of the villages there en route to looking to other areas. Similarly, also in Kenya, they did not just go or did not invade only the northeastern part of the country, but other regions which are even some of the food baskets of the country were also touched, where the locusts would go and feed, but really not stay there for a long time and move as they're looking for areas where they can be able to lay their eggs and hatch.
I see. So although it's true that the breeding might favor dry, sandy conditions, the fact is that they will eat anything anywhere, regardless of the areas that they pass over. Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting answer. And we've got one from Obert Kaseke, actually in Zimbabwe. So hi, Obert. Nice to have you with us. With both of these COVID and locust challenges, of course, having an impact on food security. And this is one of the big tragedies of the whole situation, because after quite some years of good progress on improving food security, we're seeing some backward steps now. So let me go to Mary. Mary, what kind of measures are particularly government and local authorities doing to actually support food security? What kind of safety nets are in place for families who have either been devastated by the locust invasion or a combination of locust, floods, and COVID?
Yeah, to ensure that food security is taken care of. Yes, government has various programs that they've put in place. Number one, because of the disrupted extension service, they are now looking to roll out what they are calling community facilitators. These are more or less the champion farmers, but at a higher level of operation, where now they are linked directly with the Ministry of Agriculture offices, and their capacity built in certain areas of both crop and livestock production, so that then they are able to provide this information to the farmers. So that is one area that the government is working on to ensure that farmers get information in a timely manner. And then the other thing is that there is usually a program to facilitate or to avail farmers inputs, especially fertilizers that are subsidized in terms of prices, so that the farmers are able now to access this. And the other thing is that government is supporting public-private partnerships, where now it goes into partnership with a lot of the private sector, who are more or less working on the ground and enabling the farmers to be able to access or to access services and also inputs in a more timely manner, and also expose them to technologies that are able to enhance their production. So those are just but a few to mention.
Are the authorities distributing cash to help families?
No, they're not distributing. No, not at this stage. Not yet. Not at this stage. Yeah.
A follow-up question, which I find very interesting. Has the experience of having to adjust to COVID-19 actually had, this is from Constant Adaya, by the way, so thanks for this, Constant. Has the experience of going through COVID actually had any positive impact on the strength and the performance of farmers groups, people have to come together in different ways and rely on each other in different ways. So is there any upside or any learning from having gone through this experience, from going through this experience?
Yes, there's been a lot of positive side over this season of COVID, and what has happened is that these farmers now they have adopted or found new ways of selling their produce, especially for the local vegetables, in that because of the restricted movement, they have had to do a lot of advertisement of their produce within their own local villages, because initially they would want bigger traders to come and collect their produce. But then at this time, you realize that more people are within the villages, as opposed to every day everyone moves out to go and work wherever they were working. So there was a lot of market within their own communities. And so because of the aspect of collective marketing that they had already been exposed to, then they were able now to consolidate a bit of their produce and sell within their localities. In fact, they sold more than even getting the bigger traders to come within. So the component of markets and market information really helped them to think outside the box and to make sure that they don't get stuck with their produce, but rather sell it within their localities. That is one thing.
And Mary, that's a really good, well, first of all, I really like Constance's question. That's brilliant. People are doing things in different ways and finding new markets. And I've got one more question for you, Mary, then I'm going to come back to Anna finally. But linked to that question about accessing local markets, what about the disruption to export markets? We've got a question from Rupert Knowles, who's asking about this particular topic. I know that when back in April and May, there was quite some disruption to freight export out of Nairobi. What's happened to that since then?
Okay, with the experience in Western Kenya with the Trans Nzoia, what we saw is that the exporters back then were affected in terms of their cargo space was reduced because of the reduced number of flights coming in and going out of the country, and they had to reduce the quantities that they were picking from the farmers during that time. Right now it has opened, but what happened then is that between April, when the long rains start, all the way to June, July, that is the time when production of export produce goes very high, and the demand it goes down. So because we have realized, because we know about the trends of the export market, during that time, we usually, the farmers know that they need to reduce their areas, their hectareage, so that then they don't go into high losses because of that time. So it was timely that there was reduced cargo space and we were producing less. So the exporters were able to pick the produce that we were able to produce. The capacity of the exporters is about 60 metric tons per week. And that particular time, they were only taking up to a capacity of 10 metric tons, which was okay. But now we understand,
Mary, that it's largely recovered. The export market has largely recovered since then. Okay.
Yes, they have largely
Mary,
recovered.
Let's leave that one there. Final question over to Anna, which is about a bit more looking to the future. And this is from Alex McPherson. Thank you, Alex. Through our membership of the alliance that you mentioned, the network of agencies who are looking at the locust problem, are we able to forecast into the future the onset of further rounds of desert locust swarms? And what do you think the rest of the year and into next year looks like in terms of this cycle of locust invasion?
The forecast for 2020 and to 2021, and possibly the next few years, is a little bit concerning. And this comes from, in that I had mentioned earlier that the countries were largely unprepared in being able to handle the invasion, is that we've still not been able to control the invasion totally. Right now, it's said that we've been able to control the invasion in Horn of Africa and East Africa up to 60% of the invaded land. The unfortunate bit is that Yemen is having a civil crisis, and control efforts have not really taken well there. So we are having a second invasion coming in from Yemen, and it's already been noted or been seen in Ethiopia, parts of Somali region, Afar, Tigray. Again, still the same regions are being invaded, and expected that when it moves to Somalia and overflows to Kenya, then we are going to have a cyclic invasion. Yeah. So for the future, or us being in the alliance, is that once we coordinate these efforts and know what a certain organization is doing in Somalia, in Ethiopia, in Eritrea, in different regions, is that we are able to know about the combined efforts and information of what is happening. And now the invasion is that it's going to be cyclical, in that they're still continuing to lay eggs and they're invading new areas. The good thing about it is that the governments are well prepared, the agencies are well prepared. So now with the new invasions is that we can see better efforts at being able to control the desert locust at those stages, which it's essential for them to be.
Well, Anna, that's not a bad note to finish on, which is that although the problem is going to persist, at least there is some preparedness and capacity to deal with it, both at local and national level. It's very interesting to consider how the civil war in Yemen and the collapse of governance and systems there actually has an impact on food security in East Africa through the spread of the locust swarms. Right, well, look, we're running out of time. I think we're going to call it a day there. I'm afraid we haven't quite got to all the questions. So Francis, who was asking about the prices of farm produce, and Yachele wanted to know about sustainable responses to some of these problems. We're not going to quite get to those now, but we'll try and pick them up in the text afterwards. So Mary and Anna, thank you so much for your insights today. These are fascinating topics. You've given us, really, really great examples of not only the impact of locusts and COVID on the region, but actually what Farm Africa and the communities that we are working with are doing about it. And that's a good note to finish on. That when you look at the combination of those three problems, it does look like a bleak outlook. But it's good to remember that the communities that we work with are experienced and are resilient, and that Farm Africa and our partners are there to work with them. And if anything, I think this underlines the incredible relevance of the work that we and that you are doing. So thank you very much for telling us all about it. We've got another webinar coming up in this series. It's on the 1st of December. So we'd love you to join us again then, everybody. It's all about our work on coffee, and it's linked to the UK Aid Match coffee program that we have in Uganda. And we're going to be joined by a panel of colleagues from the National Farmers Union here in the UK, who are going to be connecting directly with a group of farmers in Uganda to talk about coffee. So that's going to be a lot of fun and very interesting. So I hope you will join us. Meanwhile, thank you again, Mary and Anna, and all of the friends and colleagues that joined us on the line today. Thank you so much. It's lovely to have you with us. Hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Keep on supporting Farm Africa, and best wishes to you all. Thank you.